Hi, good night, everyone, and welcome to another edition of UIC Liberty TV. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the all important topic of good governance, and we're going to take a particular look at the UIC's manifesto and talk about some of the items. But I'm bringing on a special guest tonight to give us a different perspective, a US perspective on the whole matter of good governance, and even just chatting about Jamaica's or the UIC Jamaica's manifesto. This is the first time Mr. James Roguski and myself will be speaking about this topic. So I'm not sure what angle he's going to come from. So you're going to be hearing his thoughts for the first time, as well as myself. So we're going to hear it together, and we're going to just talk and kind of ask questions of each other, analyze what we're looking at in terms of Jamaica's present condition, but in light of where we want to go, not so much all the problems, but where do we want to go in the future? And the UIC has written quite a constitution, or draft constitution for that. But tonight we're going to be looking just at the manifesto and some of the key items in there. So let me welcome on stage now James Roguski. Welcome, James. How are you doing tonight?
I'm actually quite warm. We had almost 110 degrees here in Los Angeles today, so it's been a warm day. But
Wow.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. The only thing I would say is that the U.S. perspective might be more of a view of bad governance. I don't know that we have examples here of good governance, so I'll try to create a possibility for good governance. I don't know that we're experiencing that, but
Sure.
I have had a chance to look at your manifesto. I do believe that this is different than you said. There's also a constitution that.
Right, yes, there's a constitution, which we're not going to look into that tonight, but much of what is in the manifesto is really what will be guiding the new constitution that the UIC is proposing for Jamaica.
In a related way, okay. I've been reporting very much on the World Health Organization over the last 2.5 years. And for probably the last year or so, I've been saying to myself and saying publicly, I want to get out of the WHO and on with the new, and so out of the WHO and on with the new. And so anyone who is thinking creatively about, well, what is it that we want? It's very easy to get stuck in social media or alternative media and hear the gloom and doom and dystopian future that, the infamous they. I learned an acronym for they, THEY, the hierarchy enslaving you. And so, the they that are, I don't even really want to give them the credit of being in power, but, the powers that should not be, they have a plan. They're doing what they wish to do, and I'm always anxious to talk to anybody who is thinking outside the box and is designing or defining. What is it that we want? Okay, it's easy to say we don't want that, than to create something better. So, looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for the invite.
Sure. It's interesting you started off by saying that the US isn't really an example of good governance. And that is kind of sad because the US founding fathers, if I can use that phraseology, attempted to create a republic in the US. They attempted to create a government by the people, of the people, and for the people, and one that would protect the civil liberties of their citizens, regardless of who is in power. And really, that's an ideal that I think every country in the world should strive towards. How do we protect the civil liberties of all citizens, regardless of who is elected, so they're not empowered by the Constitution or anything to violate your fundamental human rights on any pretext? I know some people believe that if there's a time of war, then you should set aside civil liberties. If there's a pandemic, you should set aside civil liberties. The UIC takes a very different perspective. Our perspective is that your civil liberties are sacrosanct. They're sacred. They should not be tampered with, regardless of what is happening. You must be able to inform, educate, guide people, and not simply think that the only way to save us from ourselves is to take away our liberties. What do you think of that?
I might actually even go further in that direction. I don't like referring to them as civil liberties. That kind of gives the impression that they could be taken away by some, civil
Authority.
organization or whatever. I use the founding fathers' phrase "unalienable." They cannot be taken away. No one can put a lien on them or anything like that. Um, I will just share some honest reflections in digging into one of the projects I've been working on is a health freedom bill of rights, very specifically health freedoms. And when the WHO came out with the first ideas of the pandemic treaty, one of the first things that I did was put out the People's Treaty. It's like, well, hey, if you want to have a plan to oversee, what might happen in case there was a pandemic, how about you listen to what the people want, right? And that's not anything that they are doing, but I published an article about what was going on with all these negotiations, and it took me about a day to put forth like just some fundamental basic things.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, back in April of 2022, I got an opportunity to speak directly to the WHO. They had a public comment period about the treaty back in April of 2022. I, I got my 2 minutes, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to say my piece, and read some.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's me, James, but you're breaking up. Um, I'm not hearing you anymore. Miss Walker, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly, and I can
Okay,
see that our guest is having some technical difficulties.
right.
Yeah.
He's frozen at the moment. But while we're
Hmm.
waiting for James to come back on, let me just welcome all of our guests online, all of our viewers. I see
Hmm.
Nathaniel Hemmings, Juliet, and
Fundamental.
Lenward Duffus. Oh, sorry, James. We lost you there for a bit. Can you hear me now, James?
We're having some difficulties with James. Yeah.
All right, still. All right, welcome, Monica Richards, and all of our friends who are online right now watching the program. Tonight, we're talking about good governance, and we're looking at the UIC's manifesto, but we're getting a different perspective. We as Jamaicans talk to each other and talk about our own problems and so on. But sometimes it's good to get an outside perspective on what we're trying to do here in Jamaica through the UIC. Do you agree with that approach, Ms. Walker, UIC Treasurer?
I think it's long overdue because the country's a mess as we speak, and we need change like yesterday. So I think that it's time that we start having the conversation. And I think I speak not just for myself, but I would want to assume that a majority of the Jamaican citizens are looking forward to a change and a reflection of good government.
Excellent. All
Yes.
right, James, welcome back. We lost you. Your connection was bad, but you were saying something very important. But you made a particular statement where you said we need to know what the people want, and you were referring to that in the context of the people's. What was the word? What was the word, James? It was the
The People's
treaty.
Treaty. Yeah, the People's Treaty.
People's Treaty, which is really nice, the People's Treaty. But when you say what the people want, I find, and I could be wrong, but I find that oftentimes the people don't know what they want.
Very true. No doubt about that. Where
Yeah.
where I was headed with that idea may it may not sit well with some people, but I'm open to discussion about it. I found myself saying um, not unalienable rights, but I found myself saying God-given rights. And
Hmm.
I am of the belief that people, you know, should have accepted fundamental unalienable rights. But interestingly enough, when I went looking in scripture, I saw rules, I saw law, I saw commandments. But what I have come to learn is that what we call unalienable rights really come out of some kind of written social contract. Okay. If you're in a community, whether it be a family, a neighborhood, a gated community, a city, state, nation, there's a social contract, there's an agreement. And it's like, we'll give you certain authority to take care of things that we need to do collectively, but we all agree that we all have certain rights. And as I went researching through, the 50 state constitutions, and obviously the federal constitution of the United States, other documents, international documents, United Nations, all of the many declarations of rights, European Union, all that sort of stuff, I was left scratching my head going, well, different groupings of people have an agreement of differing rights that the government is not allowed to infringe on. The one that I kind of sort of remember, because it was unique when I first saw it, was in the state constitution of Louisiana. They have a guaranteed right to hunt and fish. In the California Constitution, you have a guarantee to an abortion. And I'm just like, my goodness, different groups of people have settled in on different groups of rights, different list of rights that they believe. And so, are these rights God given, or are they made of agreements, with men and women? And hold on just a moment. I was not there when the founding fathers put their documents in place. And it's almost like you have to enter in, it should be when you turn 18 or whatever the age of, consent might be. Do you agree to take part in this compact, this social contract? Do you agree to join that society? And there doesn't seem to be any ceremony or any sort of coming of age, or entering into an agreement with your fellow men and women. Yes, I will honor your rights. I will become part of that agreement that was made centuries ago. You walk into a situation that in today's world, I don't think people even comprehend the structure of the government that they live under. And did they actually agree to participate in that society? And it's a difficult question, but I
You
think
make a very
it's
good
a
point.
worthy question. Yeah.
I want to interrupt you a little bit on this, James, and I'm going to bring you in, Kerry. You mentioned God-given rights, so that's a very important statement, because not everybody sees God in the same way that everybody else sees God. So I don't know what God you serve, and even if you were to say you're a Christian, it may be that you're a Christian from the Adventist faith, and Carrie's a Christian from the Methodist faith, and I am a Christian from the Jehovah's Witness faith. And there can be all kind of conflicts there. But it's important, you said God-given, because what you're really striving for, you're trying to find a universal basis for our rights. What is this universal coverage for our rights? And the UIC, we've tried to be very, very clear on finding the common denominator, or the prime mover, the most fundamental and basic element to begin with. And where we start is with the fact that you're a sovereign entity. You're a sovereign human being. So even if you don't share the same God that I share, even if you're not a Christian, or you're not a Rastafarian, or you're not a Buddhist or a Muslim, you are a sovereign entity, and your sovereignty needs to be respected. And so the laws we make in the country must be based on the fact that you're sovereign. And then when we come together to form a nation, then we're claiming national sovereignty, so a collective sovereignty. But we must begin at the individual level. You have certain fundamental personal sovereign rights that no government or any other person or group has the right to violate. Ms. Walker, what do you think of that? Given that you're the treasurer of the UIC, does that make sense to you as the basis to begin?
I'm going to take two approach here. The first is going back to why do we have government in the first place? The people forms government and not the other way around. And today, when we look at what's going on in our society worldwide, we have to question: are we under the governance of the people, or are we under a new type of government where there's more resemblance of dictatorships? So I think the quote that says, when the people are afraid of the government, then we have dictatorships. But when the government is afraid of the people, then we have government. And right now, we have to question, what do we have at play currently? The people seems to be more afraid of the government worldwide. So we have to do a retake. When we look at how we got here in the first place, history has always been in such a manner that it's a thug of war. There's always been a power dynamic, a shift and a pull. And I think today we're at that state where we need reconsideration. And that's why I'm here to support the UIC, because I see that vision. But also, what connects all human being, I want to believe, is the system of justice. And when I look at what's playing itself out in every context throughout the world, there's a lack of justice. There's two-tier system going on throughout the planet. So I would assume that good governance and justice should go hand in hand, because
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Walker. But what I wanted to get at between us, first of all, James mentioned our God-given rights, and that is it sounds good, but it's also something we need to think about carefully because God means something else to different people. And then
right.
I mentioned the need for recognizing that we are sovereign individuals, and then we agree or should agree one way or the other to be a part of a collective, and that collective become a sovereign collective. So we talk about sovereign states. So, for example, we wouldn't want a pandemic treaty that would then override the sovereign nation from making its own decision based on its own people. But it comes back to, and I'm thinking we must begin somewhere. Either we begin with your God given rights, or we begin with you are a sovereign individual. Which one do you choose? Are you a sovereign individual, or do you want to begin from it's your God given rights, whatever those are, and who that God is?
I would say the two is in the same, because when you look at being a sovereign individual, it's coming back to the origin of why you're sovereign in the first place. Who gave you those rights? And I think it goes back to that original concept. How did we get here? What is our purpose here? We are to serve the Creator, um, and
But who said that?
therefore,
I mean, who decides that you're supposed to serve the creator, and who is the creator to you versus the creator to James versus the creator to me? So I'm
well,
struggling with, and even though I might have my own religious beliefs, I would like to take a position where this is not based on your religion because your religion is personal. It is based
right.
on something outside of your religion, meaning you have these rights regardless of which religion you appeal to. So your religion have no say. Your religion is something that you can apply as a person. That's what gives you sovereignty. But your sovereignty as part of a collective, as part of the world, isn't based on you appealing to a particular religion. What do you think of that, James?
Well, I will take a crack at trying to directly answer your question. Um, Far be it from me to think that I am greater than the Creator, whomever you or whatever it is you believe that to be. In this realm on Earth, okay, each individual man and woman are, I believe, sovereign if the community that they reside in agree to that. Our federal constitution did not give sovereignty to the slaves at the time of the forming of the constitution. So the society did not agree that women had the right to vote. They did not agree even our, glorious, respected founding fathers, um, did not put together a social compact that agreed to the individual sovereignty of every man or woman. So it
Mm.
was, it was flawed. There have been amendments, and maybe things are
Well,
closer.
mm,
So what I was trying to express was I had an assumption in my mind, and I had been repeating words and phrases that I'd heard throughout my life. People say your God-given rights. And then when I went looking in various scripture, I did not find any transfer of rights from God to me or any other person. And as I was looking through all of the many different constitutions or bills of rights or whatever you might find, I realized, my goodness, every collective group of people that got together settled in on, there's overlap, but it's a multifaceted Venn diagram, right? The rights in this area are not the same as the rights in that area.
mhm.
One of the things, I'll put it in the chat. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's an article that I did a couple of months ago now, maybe. Um, in the 50 different state constitutions, there's a number where when the people got together to create this, that, or the other of the 50 states, they reserved the right to dissolve the government that they just created.
Mhm.
And, I think every group of people has that right, but they very specifically put it in writing and said, we're creating a government. I don't really like that word. Um,
Mm.
you know, control your mind. I really don't like that. Um, but they created something that was supposed to be of service to all of them as um, as a collective entity to do things that people can't really do by themselves. Okay, like one person is not going to maintain the roads or build a dam or defend the country. So there are things that needed to be done collectively, and the authority would then be handed over to people who were chosen or elected or employed or whatever to to implement the will of the majority of the population, because no one of us can do certain things, and authority was handed over from the individual sovereign men and women. Some authority was given to this collective organization, and some states they handed over certain authority, and other states different. And health is the area where I've been focused, and the federal government in the United States has absolutely zero authority over health. Not a thing. You could do a word search on U.S.
Well,
Constitution and you're not going to find the word health. And what's been interesting and got me, and I'll end up in a moment. What got me to do this research was many people in the health freedom movement were saying, oh, it's not the WHO that should have authority over our health, right? And it's not the federal government, it's the state government. So I went looking through the state constitutions to see if the people in any state had put in their constitution when they founded this state, government, and it's not there. Our state governments, there's a couple of exceptions because we got 50 different versions. They do not have authority over healthcare either. That is still the purview of the sovereign man or woman. So I hear all these people saying, oh, the state should regulate healthcare. And I go, I never gave them that right.
here in Jamaica, the motto for our health ministry is your health is your responsibility. That's the motto. And I totally agree with it, but they don't agree with their own motto. Uh, so we always have these nice statements, sometimes even in constitutions, that do not carry out in reality. Whenever there's a health, you see, there's a place for government, and we're going to use the word in its common understanding, not its real meaning. So the common understanding is and I'll go back to Miss Walker's comment. Miss Walker, you made a comment earlier on. What is the role of government? Let's think about that. What is the role of government? I think the problem we have is that most people do not know what's the role of government. There are some people, for example, who believe that government's role is one of charity. For example, it should carry out charitable activities. When they understand the real role of government, they will actually realize that government should not be engaged in charity. And I'm going to explain that in a bit. But let's step back now. Our time is going a bit, and I want us to start looking now at the UIC Constitution because it's going to bring into discussion all of what you're talking about here, James. And we're going to come to what is the role of government. So allow me to share my screen here with you, and we're just going to do a quick walkthrough on some of the big issues. I'm going to jump back to the top here if I can get to the top. Can you see that? Can you see
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
the
we could see.
perfect? So here's the UIC's manifesto in its raw form. In fact, it is being discussed and debated right now among the leadership of the movement, and you're going through different areas of it because this has been around for quite a few years. We've not done much amendments to it, and so we're doing some now.
If I
Um,
may, I
sure.
just would like to
Yes.
say that I think the logo with the handshake over the outline of Jamaica is spectacular. Whoever's responsible for that, kudos.
Thank you. And
Quite
and
wonderful.
and I will actually just comment on it right now to say that the reason why we have the handshake, it's because Jamaica is a divided nation. In fact, most countries are built on a divisive principle of partisan politics, where you get us to get into tribes, and we become so tribal that we can no longer discuss, reason, and come to agreement outside of seeing my tribe versus your tribe, and we fight to the death for it, as you're seeing now in the
It
US.
did my heart good to see that beautiful
Thank you.
logo. Yeah.
And it was deliberately chosen by our leadership team at the time when that was done. So here we go. Um, our vision statement is very simple. Our vision is a Jamaica that brings out the best in all its people. And we deliberately chose that vision statement because the current system of governance that we have brings out the worst in our people, the absolute worst, to the point where we're willing to violently attack and kill each other for political partisan objectives. Our mission, which is what gets now into the issue of governance, is that we want to create a nonpartisan constitutional republic of Jamaica that protects your individual liberty and promotes personal responsibility. I want to hear your thoughts on this briefly, James and Ms. Walker. When you read that mission statement, what does it say to you? There are very important words here like nonpartisan and constitutional, and even the word republic, which many people think simply means to do away with a monarchy and have a president. That's not a republic. That's just not having a monarch anymore. But these words were carefully chosen by us, and I want to get your thoughts on them generally. Do you want to go first, Ms. Walker?
Well, um, I'm new to politics, so you gotta forgive me. I'm not gonna have the finesse of the terms, but
Sure.
when I look at nonpartisan constitutional, one of the system you mentioned, and I'm here in Canada, I recognize that is the partisan politics. That's what's kept us divided historically, and this is where government gets a edge over the people through partisan politics. That being said, I've seen in Jamaica where you have the JLP, the PNP, and they are diehards, and so people are no longer looking at the important issues. They're looking at the political party. So we definitely need to step away from that level of division. And I think it's a worldwide phenomenon. And we need to reevaluate what partition, our politics in general looks like. So I like
Mhm.
the idea of us moving away from that concept into something new. Constitutional Republic of Jamaica. I've heard you talk and speak highly about the republic in several countries. Singapore, I believe, was one of such country. I like the model that the Singapore government has, and I look forward to seeing examples of that coming through for Jamaicans. I do believe we deserve better than what we are having currently.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Walker. And by the way, Singapore is not a perfect republic by any stretch. What Singapore has, they have very effective policies, even if they have not fully implemented a constitutional republic. And they are a republic by definition. They're not under the monarchy like Jamaica is. They strip themselves of that, and rightfully so. But we have taken one big step ahead of Singapore in really getting to understanding the fundamental human rights of our citizens, of individuals, and seeking to protect that. James, your thoughts on the mission?
I very much agree with the nonpartisan aspect of it. I'll give you a little bit of a background. I volunteered in many ways for a couple of presidential candidates over the past decade. And in between elections, I questioned, what were the actual positions of the parties in the United States, Democrat, Republican, but also Green and Libertarian and Peace and Freedom and Constitution and Communist and everything else. And a handful of years ago, I literally printed out all of the party platforms, color coded, chopped them all up, organized them, put them all together, and read through them at great length to try to comprehend, what is my position? What do I believe on this, that, or the other, aspect of society? And the end result was I had put together websites, looking to organize a political platform. And I came to realize that the problem was the concept of having political parties. If you go back to the founding fathers in the United States, George Washington, technically really not associated with the political party and warned against it. But, while he was president, the party started and the fighting and bickering started. I don't see how you can serve the people when what happens is politicians serve first the wishes of their party, and country and the people be damned, because the power structure is designed, and there's a lot of study, with many nations that have multiple parties. It tends to create division, and so it's no
And
surprise.
it actually weakens the people in the end,
I believe so.
because one of the things that happens to you when you become a partisan person, you can no longer think freely. You think in terms of the party. So in Jamaica, for example, if I, as the president of the UIC, were to say it's a very good idea for Jamaica to do A, both of the other two parties members would say, that's dumb, that makes no sense, that cannot be done, it should not be done. Now, if tomorrow one of the leaders of the other party says, we should do A, whatever A is, suddenly the very same person will, yes, that's a brilliant idea, we should do A, and the other party would say, no, you shouldn't do A, and whatever. And if tomorrow the next party says you should do A, then all of their followers, yes, you should do A. And it's really very ridiculous. So the UIC understands the issue of partisan politics, and it is at the core of our objective to do away with that. Now, many people don't know how to get that done. We have spent time to work out how to achieve a non-partisan constitutional republic. The word constitutional is also important because constitutional means you're no longer going to be simply based on the whims of whoever happens to win the election. We call it the whims of men. So the way the current systems are, so-called democracies, whoever wins, it's a new wind of doctrine that comes in, and we just kind of flow with it, and things become flexible, and you can end up going way over here or way over there. In a constitutional republic, there are certain fixed elements, certain things you do not mess with. They stand no matter who you elect. And one of those things, and very, very importantly, is the sovereignty of the individual, which we're making that very fixed. So whether you have a pandemic or not, your sovereignty is fixed. Whether you have a war or not, your sovereignty is fixed. Whether you have a brilliant, charismatic leader or not, who has a beautiful vision of the future, your sovereignty is fixed. So nobody gets to come in, whether he's a Hitler or he's a John F. Kennedy or he's a Martin Luther King. He doesn't get to mess with your sovereignty simply because he's more popular or more brutal than the person before him. And that's why constitutional republics are so important. Don't just say republics, because everybody can be a republic. China is a republic, the Republic of China, and they can take away your rights like this. They can open up the market economy when they feel like it, and they can withdraw those rights when they feel like it. They can crush dissent if they feel like it. So that's not a republic, but we have all been led to believe just putting republic in the name of your country makes it a republic. No, it doesn't. A republic is an institution that protects the sovereignty of the individuals. And so we go on to say there are two core things for us in this republic. One is your individual liberty, say another way, your sovereignty. And the other one promotes personal responsibility. Another way, accountability, personal accountability. So you need to take accountability. You need to be held responsible for the things that you, as an individual, are supposed to do in your own life, in your own family. But you also have rights that are reserved to you that no one is able to take from you. So, for example, if I think you're too fat, you're too obese, I don't have the right to take away your sugar or to take away um, the food that you eat. I can say to you, I think you should eat more fruits and vegetables and less oily stuff. But I can't pass a law to say, I want to save you from yourself. So I'm going to pass a law that says you cannot eat fatty foods, you cannot eat sugar, you cannot eat salt. That's really where we're going here. We're ensuring that government finds its rightful place. And the place of government is really to provide public goods and services and not interfere with the market in providing private goods and services. I'm going to pause here so you can respond to that, both of you, quickly.
Well, I'll take
Go
it.
for Go ahead, Ms. Walker.
I just wanna go back to the whole the whole partisan politics. I think of partisan politics also as another divide and conquer sort of concept, which is historically what has always been used against the human population. Is this you got to be on one side or the other, which prevents us from sharing, looking at our common good, our common interest. And so when we're looking at the reversal of what you have here, which is personal responsibility, individual sovereignty, it seems like these concepts bring us more in uniformity with each other, rather than the whole aspect of dividing and conquering.
Well said. It actually leads us to respect each other. But go ahead, James, your comment.
No, I very much agree with what both of you have said. I would love to live in a world, or at the very least, a country or a state where there are no political parties, because honestly, I think they get in the way of progress. To elaborate on what I said earlier, too, as I was looking through all of these party platforms, it's practically impossible for two people, let alone a nation filled with people, to agree on all of these many issues.
Mhm.
What needs to be done is, when you find agreement on an issue, you need to be able to work to implement whatever you think the best solution might be. But the way the party dynamic works is you have to support every aspect of the party's position. And that's just, quite frankly, not possible.
Mhm.
People have different ideas. And just to, a simple situation, if a party platform, the party was, 60-40 in support of some issue, that would be the party line that you would be obligated to withhold.
Mhm.
But everyone else in the country might be 100-0 against that policy. So the vast majority of the population would be in the opposite camp. The solutions would be then, opposed by the party. It's just structurally wrong. What we need, in my opinion, is the flexibility of realizing that if we put 100 issues on the table, the three of us, and I said, here's my number 1 through 100 priorities, and you did the same with your priorities, and everyone else, um, the odds of our priorities all aligning are nearly impossible, right? It's just
Mhm.
not going to happen.
Absolutely.
What we need to do is deal with an issue, find a consensus or at least an agreement in that issue, find allies who want to solve the problem, improve the situation, and make it better. Party be damned.
Yeah, what you're
As,
talking about here, James, is you're talking about designing a system where we're not immediately blocked from being able to find consensus because we are hard lined in a particular group. And that's what we're trying to achieve here with this manifesto. So now we move into our values, because I believe when you're going to be a part of a movement or an organization or a party in this case, because the UIC had to be a party to participate in the electoral process. But we are the party to get rid of partisan politics, which means when you elect us, you're electing us to get rid of the system.
Yep.
So here's what we're saying. What are our values? Because you need to know the values of the movement you're in. I can ask any Jamaican right now, if they're a part of one of the other two political parties, they have no idea what their values are, because those two parties, they have a very simple value system. We're here to win power at all cost. So they have no values. No, well, they have values, but it's a bad value, right? It's power at all costs, whatever it takes to get government, and we get it, and then we hold it. Our values are very different. We value your individual liberty. We value your personal sovereignty. We value ensuring you understand that as an individual, you're responsible for certain things, and you should not expect, for example, wealth redistribution. You should not expect that the government exists to take from some and give to you. And that's a very serious problem in the minds of many of us because of how we were trained. Because when parties are fighting each other, they create dichotomies: the poor against the rich, black versus white, male versus female, children versus parents. They keep trying to divide us, religion versus this. Go right around the world. It's always an attempt to divide us into camps, as opposed to understanding there's a place for male and female. There's a place for parents and children. There's a beauty of blacks and whites and all of the race working together. There's a beauty in the diversity that we have, and let's work with the diversity. Do not make it into something that we need to fight each other over. So one of our value judgment or value system is liberty and responsibility. The other one is we believe in a system that gives equal opportunity to everyone. That means when you're born into this country, no attempt must be made to deny you of the opportunities to be the best that you can be. We believe in equal rights. So we're not going to have gay rights. We're going to have rights. So everybody will have the same rights. We're not going to single out a particular group and say, you have a special set of rights. And you have no, we all have the same rights. Male and female have the same rights. Now, of course, you will have certain responsibilities now for those who are children, because children can't make their own decisions. So you have to protect children from abuse. Seniors, particularly at a certain point in their lives, might be very vulnerable. So you have to have rules to protect seniors, but all consenting adults would have the same daily rights as everybody else. And you must have equal justice. Now, the justice system is important because justice cannot be based on how much money you have, because if it's based on how much money you have, then it becomes an unjust system. So whatever system you design, it must be one which accommodates the inequities natural inequities, not forced or fraudulent inequities, but natural, because you're always going to have natural inequities. You're going to have, if you put 10 guys to run a 100 meters, one will be faster than the other nine. Not because he's black or white, not because he was given any special unfair advantage by any one of us. Usain Bolt was not made the fastest man on earth because some government gave him a special benefit over others. In fact, he was among those who were deprived of many things as a child. But because of his own drive and commitment, he made himself into the fastest man in the world. And there are other young men who were born under the same circumstances as him, who experienced the same difficulties that he did, but they did not do what he did to become the fastest man in the world. And maybe they did not want to become the fastest man in the world. Maybe one of them is the best chef in the world. Maybe one is the best chemist in the world. Maybe one is the best artist in the world. Let's stop thinking that because somebody has achieved, we are going to try to now say it's because of some kind of injustice. If it's an injustice, however, let's say you have a politician, let's say you have a prime minister who he can show no basis for how he has accumulated the wealth that he has, but he has great wealth. He can show no basis for the investments he has overseas, but he has overseas investments. Then you have to now dig into that and identify the source of that income. And if it is found to be fraudulently achieved, then he must pay the price. He must go to jail. And those who he has defrauded must be compensated. So we want to make sure we have real equal justice here, and not justice for the rich and injustice for the poor, or justice for the connected and lack of justice for the disconnected. And finally, the real role of government, when you really think about it, is to create a safe space for all of us, is to create a clean environment for all of us, because they're responsible for the public amenities, to create a very orderly environment so we can go about our business rather efficiently. Back in the good old days of the West, you get up and you go outside and you find a piece of land and you stake it, and you fight off the poor Indians who are trying to get back the land that you've just come and staked, and you form a posse and you build enclaves, and you finally get hold of this little space and you deputize a sheriff, and you settle dispute with maybe a quick draw or whatever. No, we want a system of governance that allows you to be able to safely go about your business in a clean environment, proper street lights, proper roads, proper sidewalks, all the basic stuff. So our value system is, let's have the basics in place for everyone. And we believe fundamentally that you must have a free and fair market economy if you're going to have a free and fair society. You cannot have a free society if you don't have a free market economy. So there are some people who have been led to believe that you're to be against free markets and against free trade because somehow it's bad. Well, the thing is, if you're not free to trade, then you're not a free person. Quickly, Ms. Walker, your comment on that, and then Mr. Rogan before we move on to the next item.
Well, it goes back to the idea of who does partisan politics really benefits. It seems not to be for the people. So, who is behind the whole idea of partisan politics? Who has historically gained from this? And so, I do agree completely and wholeheartedly with the UIC's position based on the explanation that you just gave, because this seems to be more orderly and has a greater impact on society as a whole. So we really have to start looking at who we elect and for what reasons and purposes, and move away from the whole idea of my apologies,
Partisan politics. Thank
partisan
you.
politics.
I get
Yeah,
the tongue twister as well.
yeah.
Go ahead, James. Your thoughts quickly.
Um, from a United States perspective, we've had almost 250 years to pile too much on top of our Constitution. Our Constitution is by no means perfect. It was deeply flawed out of the gate. It had certain benefits to it. There have been, a number of amendments to it. But the absolute millions tens of millions of words of legislation and court, decisions and regulation makes it so that no one, I was going to say the average person, but no one can even begin to comprehend the complexity of it. And so it's designed by the law profession to make it be that you need to employ people in the law society to
Absolutely.
give you even the slightest chance of comprehending what the rules are.
Hmm.
Well, there's many different examples that you might find where, sometimes on like I'm looking at my desk here and I've got a pile of papers in the corner, and what I need to do is I need to just take everything off my desk and start fresh. You know, and really, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, you need a revolution every 20 years. We're 230 years late. Okay. We need to wipe all of the crud that has been added on. I used to be a renovation carpenter. I used to renovate old homes. Um, and, old homes can be very beautiful, and it's worth putting in the extra effort to bring back the beauty, repair, restore, and keep the integrity of the old home. But sometimes you look at it and you just go, this is a vermin infested, waste. You need a bulldozer and start over. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
it's just too far gone.
And
And with all of the regulations and laws and everything that's been piled on over the years, self-serving legislators who
mhm,
have been influenced by whoever it was that influenced them have tipped the scales in the rules to the point where they understand them because they can afford to have lawyers help them understand,
mhm.
and they were crafted for their benefit. When
Absolutely. Yeah.
at,
Yeah.
at
The,
some
the
point
whole
you
the,
need to throw it all away and start over.
the whole thing is designed to do the opposite of what we're trying to do here. It's
Mhm.
designed to obfuscate the whole thing. It's designed to make simple things complex. It's
Mhm.
designed to distract and to give those with the means control of all the levels of so-called power. So I see Sulfa, big up yourself, Sulfa, online saying political parties are strategically designed and embedded in the political system, I imagine, to keep us divided and busy with the minor issues. Correct, Sulfa. Thanks for sharing that thought. Carol Spence, good to see you on One Perfect Love. And Rumination with Andrew says the Christian Protestant nations are the only countries which believe in the sovereignty of the individuals. That's interesting. All right, the UIC has a pledge. Again, these things were developed over weeks and months of consultations and discussions with our members. Of course, I've been the chief architect driving the process, but we've had inputs. I remember this pledge in particular. There's a young lady, well, she's older than me actually. She helped me to write this pledge, and a lot of her comes out in this. I hope she's watching now. She's no longer in the leadership of the UIC, but she, about, I think in 2019 or so, she was helping with this. And the pledge is very simple. Can you read it for us, Miss Walker? I'm not sure if you can see it. Can you
Oh,
read
let
it for
me
us?
try and make my screen a bit bigger. As
Yeah.
one who loves my life, my liberty, and the right to earn, own, and freely enjoy my property, I pledge to respect and help to protect the life, liberty, and property rights of all others, to do my part in helping my fellow citizens create a safe, clean, and orderly society where all may live, earn, and retire with dignity in true liberty, one where unprovoked force and fraud are abolished from all human relationships, so that we may finally become one Jamaica, united, strong, and free.
Yo, what are your thoughts on that, Miss Walker?
Well, absolutely, because I think that's what this is going back to the whole system of justice for me, and the whole and I think all human beings on the planet has the right really to feel a sense of safety, a sense of protection, cared for, have the right to earn a living. I think what you're looking at today is that we're all being denied many of these rights, fundamental rights. And when you look at the source, you got to look back at in the imbalance of power right now. From the last statistic I looked at, you have 1% of the world's population controlling 99% of the resources, while you have 99% of the people with only 1%. So clearly there's a strategy and someone is working to deny the well-being of all of the majority of Earth's population, and we all have that in common no matter where we live. It's not just a
Thank you, Ms.
Jamaican
Walker.
problem,
Yeah,
etc.
thank you. No, appreciate that. Mr. James, what are your thoughts on the pledge?
Well, it's quite beautiful, and it is exactly what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Um, a community, a society, a nation, um, as people are born and enter into that society, at some point, is it when they reach the age that they are then able to vote, that they only get to vote if they take the pledge?
I like that idea. You mentioned it earlier on. It's you call it a social contract, which we've heard before in different ways. But what you're
And
saying is to be very deliberate about it, to have young adults. So you have now completed high school. You're now entering into adulthood at maybe the age of 18 in Jamaica and maybe the US as well. Then you, just like when you're actually, when you're becoming a citizen of the US or Canada or many countries, you don't just become a citizen. You have to do a test and then you have to make a pledge.
Mhm.
And it's funny, the citizens who are born in that country, they don't do that. So you
Yes.
can be a citizen of America because you were born there, or Canada or Jamaica, but you never ever had to do a test to show that you understand the governance of the country, that you understand the constitution of the country, and that you are making a pledge to say you're going to support and defend the constitution of that country. Now, of course, in Jamaica, we do not have a constitution of our own. We have a fake document which was imposed upon us. But just imagine a new Jamaica, a brand new Jamaica, where we now design our own constitution and make a pledge to ourselves, our collective, and identify our personal responsibility. I love this pledge because it says, I am being very clear about it. I love my life. Jamaica has a song. There's a beautiful song called I Love My Life. I don't know if you've ever heard it. You should look it up. I love my life. I love my liberty. And I love the right to earn and to own and to freely enjoy my property. And because of that, I'm pledging to respect other people's lives, other people's liberty, and other people's property. And I'm even going to help to protect theirs, because protecting theirs and them helping to protect mine is the best arrangement we could have. So I'm going to do my part to help my fellow citizens create a safe, clean, and orderly society where all of us can live, earn, and retire, not only with dignity, but with true liberty. And we're going to make sure that unprovoked force, this is where you initiate force against me or I initiate force against you. We want to get rid of unprovoked force and fraud. We want to abolish them from all human relationships so that we may finally become three things: united, strong, and free. Because those three are important. We must unite around good governance. With that, we can become a very strong country economically, even militarily, to protect our borders. And we must be a free people, not under any form of dictatorship where you or a subset of us gets the right to dictate to the rest of us. So that's the idea behind the pledge here. And the same sentiments are expressed in our philosophy. I'm not sure if you can see that, James. Can you read it for us, the philosophy, please? And we can talk.
I have it right in front of me.
Go ahead.
It is the right of every human being to be free. Therefore, the only moral justification of government is to protect the life, liberty, and property rights of every citizen equally. Good governance is therefore the protection of individual liberty and property rights, promotion of personal responsibility, and the provision of a safe, clean, and orderly society. Protecting our individual liberty and property rights is the only sure foundation for a truly peaceful and prosperous nation. Absolutely. It quite frankly takes me back. I'm 64 years old, and 40 some years ago, 50 years ago almost, I was in 10th grade taking my American government class, and I can still picture myself there and listening to the teacher saying something quite similar to all of this. That the United States was based on the premise that you're free to live your life however you want, so long as you respect everyone else's rights to live their lives in that same way. It hit a chord. It struck me deep down inside. It never has gone away. And I wonder that a lot of people who've gone to school, after I have different situations, never got that blessing, never got that awareness, never got that understanding. And they think that, the government is a sugar daddy, or they want to be in government so that they can control other people.
Exactly. Or they can give out free stuff to other people because they see government as a vehicle for charity as opposed to what it should be. Government is not there to give out charity. Government is supposed to protect our individual rights and to provide us the public goods and services we all need in common. So government is not there, should not be there to give you a special benefit or a subset of us a special benefit. It should give all of us the same benefit of a safe environment, a clean environment, an orderly environment, and we are therefore empowered to do the things we need to do to earn and take care of our families. Now let's move on quickly to the preamble of the manifesto, because what you read before was really an introduction, our objectives, our vision, and so on. But here's a preamble now to the manifesto, and it begins by calling us uniters, because that's what we call ourselves. So we seek to create one Jamaica, united, strong, and free. This will be a true republic. And we have to say true because there are many false republics. The Republic of China, the Republic of Cuba, the Republic of the US, the Republic of there's so many republics out there that are not true republics. So we want to have a true republic that is not divided by class or color or community or party, that protects the life, liberty, and property rights of everyone equally, that ensures everyone may live, earn, and retire with dignity and true liberty, that is among the safest, cleanest, and most orderly of all nations for the maximum efficiency, productivity, and prosperity of every citizen. We shall be united around the principle of good governance, be strong economically and militarily, and be truly free by respecting individual liberty, promoting personal responsibility, and protecting our collective sovereignty. Protecting the life, liberty, and property rights of every citizen equally is the essential precondition for a truly free, fair, and prosperous nation. Without this protection, there can be no peace. Only the poverty, crime, and violence we experienced under chattel slavery, colonialism, and bad governance. So any Jamaican who reads this, if they have any basic appreciation for what we have been suffering for the last 63 years of so-called independence and 80 years of self-governance, this should really resonate with them if they have that consciousness. To be honest with you, many won't have that consciousness because they're so deprived that they're focused just on their daily existence. And that is a big part of the problem, because those in political power are able to manipulate the vast majority because they have no headspace for this kind of thinking. They just want to survive. So if you promise them that I'm going to give you a small token for free, that's all they need to hear. They don't need to hear any of this because this doesn't matter. Just basic life survival. But I want us to continue on quickly now to the other segment of this preamble before we have a quick chat about it. It says we must banish the use of force and fraud. And we didn't talk about this earlier on so much from all human relationships, as it is only through voluntary, mutually beneficial exchange where we trade value for value with each other that we may enjoy true peace and prosperity as a nation and people. Consequently, we will defend the right of everyone to engage in any activity that is peaceful and honest and welcome the diversity, creativity, and prosperity that true freedom or liberty brings. The society we seek to build is one where individuals are free to follow their own dreams in their own ways without interference from government or any authoritarian power, provided they do not initiate force or engage in fraud to infringe upon the life, the liberty, or property rights of others. Our goal is therefore nothing more or less than to create a society where all are truly free to realize their full potential in a safe, clean, and orderly environment that is, and it is to this end we seek we take these stands. We follow the following are our basic principles for the policies we derive from them. Then we're going to go into those principles. But two words here, Ms. Walker, Mr. Roguski, is force and fraud. Not initiating force and fraud, abolishing force and fraud from all human relationships. What are your thoughts on those? You go first, Ms. Walker.
I want to say that look at our current state of affairs with government on a whole. The two strong point is force and fraud. Our government, who tends to be the most fraudulent in most instances, are the ones that use the most force against the common folks. And so we have a prison system, we have a system that is premised on locking away individuals for small, petty crimes, when we have governments who are guilty of great fraud, taking trillions of dollars from the pockets of taxpayers without penalties. So there's really an imbalance in governance. And so moving towards a system where everyone is held to account, no matter what status or position they may hold, is ideal for all members of society. And that's what we all should be looking forward to.
Thank you. I mean, I tell you, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you think about it carefully, crime, there are really only two forms of crimes, and I could be wrong, but let me hear your thoughts. One is you either initiating force to take somebody's life or to take somebody's property or to take away somebody's freedom, right? So you initiate force. You don't want to simply trade value for value with the other persons. You believe that the way for you to get value is either for you to kill this person and take what they have, or enslave them and extract their labor, or rob them of their existing property. That's the force, right? Or you defraud them, you misrepresent what you're selling, or you trick them into believing something other than what is really happening, and by that you extract wealth from them. James, your thought on that?
My thought and my answer is going to expand a little bit and maybe be a little bit more philosophical. I've observed that, people, obviously everyone is unique, and there's a spectrum, in any category from one far extreme to the other and everything in between. And what I've observed with people in general is there are those who had a similar experience to what I said earlier. Hey, you're free to live your life however you want to. You're just not supposed to infringe upon other people's rights. So there are people who their own freedom and everyone else's freedom is primary in the way they view the world. Okay. Well, over on the other end of the spectrum, probably a somewhat equal amount of people who feel superior. They feel they've got some sort of divine right to tell everybody else what they have to do. And it seems like it's those people, I'll just call them control freaks, okay, who want to get themselves into positions of authority in government, because people who are, be free, live your life, do whatever you want to do, they're too busy enjoying life and doing what they want to do and letting everybody else live their lives. They don't want to be in the position that we find our bureaucrats and politicians seeking. So there's just a natural settling. It's kind of like a pinball game or something where, you throw all the balls and they hit all the different pins,
but they come back down to the base.
And there's a bell curve where, there's most of the people in the middle are normal people. There's some people on the extreme who are, very much pro-freedom, but then there's a certain subset in every population. I listened to a gentleman give a talk the other day, and he was talking about how in his work in the military, he commanded like a couple of battalions, and he said, there was 5% who they were just in it for themselves,
Mhm.
and they wanted to control everything, they wanted to take advantage of everything, and you had to control that 5%, otherwise it would infect another 15%, and the 80% of people who are great, you know you have to protect their rights and freedoms by not allowing that 5% to
Mhm.
infiltrate and control. And
And
so,
that is why, James, the system is so important. Like the Constitution is so important. If you have a poorly written Constitution, if you have an unclear Constitution, if you have a Constitution that allows for that 5% to infect the rest of us,
Mhm.
it takes down the entire thing. And that's the problem. You need a Constitution that makes it absolutely clear that we're sovereign individuals. That's where I begin.
Mhm.
It must be very clear that we're sovereign individuals, and here are the limits of government. This is how far government can go and why. It should not be arbitrary, by the way. It should be very clear. We should explain to our people the reason why we limit government is because you're sovereign, and government is here to serve you. And by serving you, I mean serving all of us the same way. Government is not here for a subset of us to use it to control the rest of us. Government is not here for a subset of us to use it to take from some of us to give to some of us. So you have many people, because they are poor, and I know everything about poverty. I was born in abject poverty, so I fully understand poverty. But they believe because they are poor, they have a right to use the government to take from the rich to give to them. And that's wrong. And
Mhm.
then you have some now who are rich, and I have experienced living rich, and they believe because they're rich, they know more than everybody else, and they have the right to control the government to manage the rest of these poor folks in the ways that they want to manage them. And both sides are wrong.
Mhm.
Government is here to protect the sovereignty of every single individual, rich, middle income, poor. Once you are a human being, your rights are just as important as the next person, whether they're far richer than you or far poorer than you or just on the same level. And government is not a tool to be used to satisfy the personal desires of any one of those subsets. It's here to ensure that every single individual is able to trust the government to protect their rights from everyone else. So no one is allowed to initiate force to kill you. They can use it to defend themselves, which may kill you. So if you're trying to harm somebody else, they have the God-given, if you will, rights to defend themselves. And the government should not seek to take away your right to defend yourself. What it should do is to ensure that you understand the consequences if it's proven that it was not self-defense, you know. But it should not seek to say, oh, we want to protect society, and the way to protect society is to make sure we disarm you. So even though you're not guilty of a crime and you're not going out there trying to hurt anyone, we're going to disarm you because we can't trust you to defend yourself. You must dial 911 or 119 in the case of Jamaica, and you should wait patiently while your home is being invaded until the police finally gets there and find out if you're still alive. The UIC says no, you must not be retarded by the government from being able to fully and unequivocally defend yourself immediately from any threat, and then explain yourself in court if that's the case, or to the police, and why and what happened. And we take evidence and we assess the situation. And yes, it was a home invasion, and he shot the man in his head, and he was able to defend himself, and he's alive today because we did not disarm him. Your thoughts, Ms. Walker?
Well, I want to believe that the U.S. Constitution started off with that premise, and yet have violators of the very Constitution, because it seems like everything that you said just a minute ago falls in line with what the Constitution in the United States intended it to be. Um, Now we have government asking citizens to disarm themselves. So I'm not
Yeah, and
sure.
it's because the U.S. Constitution did not go all the way. For example, as Mr. Roguski pointed out earlier on, for example, when they made the Constitution, all men are created equals. Blacks were not men, and women were not men,
Right.
and the Native Indians were not men. So if
Hmm.
you put certain principles on the table, but then
Hmm.
you create avenues to break those principles, then you lose. But if you make a truly principled document that says all men, and we mean all men and women, all human beings, and these inalienable rights are truly inalienable. So if you, like in the UIC's constitution, we put it this way: if the government seeks to violate these rules, the
Right.
people have the right to take down that government by any means necessary. That's what we write in our constitution. You don't have to say, "Oh no, we can't. We have to follow some rules that they are rigged, that they can rig to prevent us from taking down the government." No, it says if the government seeks to violate your rights, then you are automatically empowered by this constitution to, by any means necessary, take that government down, as long as it's true that they've violated this right. And we've done that in a very articulate way in the document we're creating for the Constitution. But James, your thoughts before we go any further?
There's so many things to discuss. One of the flaws that I am blasphemous if I raise it in regards to the U.S. Constitution is many laws have been written and enacted, voted in, and accepted that are clearly in violation of aspects of other people's rights in the Constitution and so forth. One very obvious one is the Vaccine Injury Act that took away jurisdiction from the courts and set up a special class of corporations and gave them immunity from harming other people. Pharmaceutical
Yeah.
companies can,
Mhm.
cause great harm, and they're protected. And clearly, that law is in violation of the fundamental principles, many different ways in the Constitution. But the way it works its way through the system is someone has to be so deeply harmed that they have standing to bring a case that they're not allowed to bring in any court because of the way the law is structured, to make their case that they've been harmed and get it to the point where the Supreme Court would rule on it and say, no, that law needs to be struck down. It's in violation of the Constitution. That type of analysis, that sort of judicial review of any act of any legislature, should follow immediately after the passage of that legislation. There should be a judgment.
Absolutely.
There should be
Absolutely.
a judgment that says, no, 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 sorry, dear
As a matter of
legislators,
fact, James,
you
it,
don't
it
have.
should not it should not even pass. The law should not even before a law is passed. It should be legally tested. So first you have somebody proposing the law.
Mhm.
You have the debate of they call it a bill. You debate the bill, and then you have a vote in the houses,
Mhm.
representative, senate, whatever, and then they say, okay, it has now passed all the legislative process. But before it's enacted, it now must go to the courts and be tested. It should not be that citizens have to find money and energy and time to go up against the massive state to contest against a law they're bringing forward. It
Yeah.
should be tested immediately by the courts. That's why we should have sitting judges and a full system, and they're empowered with resources to do what we, the ordinary citizens who are not daily collecting billions in taxes, to make sure they test these laws and see, are they constitutional? And if they're found not to be constitutional, then they're struck down. But let's move on because we're running out of time. So our statements of principles, Ms. Walker, do you want to read the first couple of paragraphs on the statement of principles for us? I don't know if you can see it, or if you have your
Certainly.
copy
Let
with you.
me attempt to do that. So the first
So,
couple of paragraphs.
yeah.
We, the members of the United Independence Congress of Jamaica, hereby challenge the moral authority of the omnipotent state of defense and inherent rights of
No,
every
no, stop,
individual.
stop, stop. 1 second. So we challenge the moral authority of the omnipotent state and defend the inherent rights of every individual to be free. So we are challenging the omnipotent state because that's what we have. We have a godlike thing that we call the state today. The government is becoming our god. They can decide what is hate speech. They can decide what is misinformation. They can decide who has what rights, and they can. It's becoming very dangerous. The state, very very dangerous. So we're challenging that omnipotent state. Continue. We hold that all individuals.
Yes, so we hold that all individuals have the right to exercise sole dominion over their own lives and to have the right to live in whatever manner they choose, so long as they do not forcibly interfere with the equal rights of others to live in whatever manner they choose. Government throughout history have regularly operated on the opposite principle that the state has the right to regulate the lives of individuals and dispose of the fruits of their labor as it sees fit. All political parties, other than the UIC Jamaica, grant to government these rights to regulate the lives of the individuals and seizes the fruits of their labor without their consent in the form of arbitrary laws, regulations, and taxations. We, on the contrary, deny the right of any government to do these things and hold that where governments exist, sorry, they must not violate the rights of any individual, namely the right to life. Accordingly, we oppose the initiation of physical force against others, the right to freedom of speech and action. Accordingly, we oppose all attempts by government to censor in any form, and the right to property. Accordingly, we oppose all government interference with private property, such as confiscation, nationalization, and eminent domain, and support the prohibition of robbery, trespass, fraud, and misrepresentation. To this end, the lands stolen from these enslaved must be returned to their descendants free of charge in a reasonable and practical manner, and where possible, lost earnings and generational wealth due to enslavement and compensation of learning for learn for learning lost due to denial of the freedom to be educated should be made.
Thank you. Wow, that's a mouthful, I know. But
Yeah.
James, quickly, your thoughts on that. Very short commentary there, James, if you
Um,
can.
I recently, in my city in which I live, was looking online to see if I could find the budget of the city. And what I found first was a 136-page document of all of the many fees that the municipal government institutes to make money from the population. It was very clear that it's become a business. You
Yes.
need a license to do this or a permit to do that or a fee to involve yourself in this, that, and the other thing. It's become very clear that government is behaving like a business,
Mhm.
and many people want to be in the position to enrich themselves through that. And
Stick a pin there, James. That is exactly how it is in Jamaica. I mean, it's getting bad and worse in the US and other countries, but here in Jamaica, it's almost the fact that it's impossible for any Jamaican to become wealthy unless they're fully involved and engaged in the government.
Mhm.
So you cannot in Jamaica just simply be a highly productive citizen having a structure of your country so that you are, you can efficiently go about your business in a well orderly manner that allows you to focus on your product, developing a product, designing a product, marketing a product, selling a product. And because of that, because you have found a way to give value to your fellow men, you have you are in turn valued by them. So, for example, if a young Jamaican programmer were to sit down and design a payroll program, which we badly need here in Jamaica, a local payroll program, a software, and he were, and I think of all these things, and he were to design a beautiful software program to calculate payroll and all government taxes and do all the deductions and prepare nice pay slips and whatever. If one young man, and we have the potential to do that, were to sit down and do that, and then sells this software to the many companies and small business here in Jamaica, he or she would be very, very wealthy if they were to just do that. But the moment they try to do that, the government will find a way to make their lives miserable, and they'll try, and then somebody in government will try to co-opt it and take it away from him and then make it theirs, and then you'll see it come out as somebody else's. So the people are always under the stress of the government is competing with them, the government is fighting with them over this. But before I go any further, I want to just come back to what Ms. Walker read a while ago at the very bottom. Notice we talked about the right to property. And we first laid out the issue of property rights. That is the right to own property. And your most important property, first of all, is you. So you own you. But beyond that, we also pointed out that there is an injustice that needs to be corrected. And we're going to do that in an orderly way. The injustice is that at the time of emancipation in 1834-38, the slaves who became former slaves were not given back their lands. They were not given back the monies stolen from their slave labor, and they were not compensated for the loss of learning, because a part of slavery, the strategy was to make sure the slaves could not learn to read or write. It was a crime to be caught reading a book, and so they were deliberately kept academically ignorant, and they were deliberately kept in servitude and lost their earnings, and they were robbed of the land. So we believe that needs to be corrected. Now, how do you correct that? First of all, we want to ensure that we tell the people that none of this land belongs to the government, and none of this land belongs to the crown. All of this land belongs to you. And we as a collective must now decide how we optimize that land, giving you a portion for you to have a resident, and having portions that are allocated to public service, such as government buildings and schools and hospitals and libraries and so on, and green spaces and so on. But fundamentally, you're entitled to this land, and your ancestors should have had this land, and then it should have been passed down to you as a generational asset, which would become a part of your generational wealth. And so we have designed a way, how can we be what the principled government we are, or the principled constitution we're creating, but still seek to address injustices that were done in the past, and remedy that in a very structured way for our people. And I think we have really constructed this very well. What are your thoughts on that, James? Particularly the idea of land reparations for those who have been denied this right.
There's a person here in Los Angeles that I'll have to introduce you to, far more knowledgeable about that than I am. And I actually am looking forward. I've had a chance to read your manifesto. I have not had a chance to read the other documents that you have. So please, do make it a point to send that to me. That is of interest. It's a difficult issue, and there are people who certainly know more about it than I do.
Yes, thank you. So, Ms. Walker, could you continue? Since governments, when instituted.
Okay, let me expand my screen so I could see it better. Since the governments, when instituted, must not violate individual rights, we oppose all interference by government in the areas of voluntary and contractual relations among individuals. Similarly, no one should not be no one should be
Yeah, that's an
forced.
error. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
an error.
a
Yeah.
typo. So no one should be forced to sacrifice their lives, earnings, or property for the benefit of others. All should be left free by government to deal with one another as free traders. And the only economic system compatible with the protection of individual rights is the free market. Wealth confiscation or forced distribution is unethical and immoral and should also be illegal.
Wonderful. Oftentimes, you'll hear people say very negative things about the free market. And I've heard and I've seen many former colonies in Africa, the Caribbean. The first thing they did when they became independent countries, so called, was to introduce socialism, where they granted the government the power to confiscate everything and own everything and try to tell the people that the best way for us to go about life is to centralize everything in the hands of a few and to have them dole out things to people. That has not worked. It has failed the people of all those countries. It has robbed them of development, and it has only allowed them to become extremely corrupt. So, what we have done is to ensure that we make it very clear that the government's role is really to facilitate the people to help themselves. It's to give the people the freedom to truly develop their economy, to truly develop their lives, and to engage in free and fair market economy, and not have government get in the business of trying to redistribute wealth by force. The only way you should use force to redistribute wealth is if you know that somebody has stolen something. So if you have stolen from somebody, then it must be forcibly, it cannot be peacefully taken from you. So you have stolen this asset, it must be returned to those you stole it from. But the idea of having a government that simply say we're going to decide to take from others who we want to take from and give to other people because we decide that's the best thing to do, that's very dangerous. So we want a very moral system. And that moral system is one where you allow people to freely trade voluntarily, value for value with each other, and no one is sacrificed for anyone. If I want to sacrifice for you, that must be my choice. It must not be the government who sacrifices me to help you. Mr. Roguski, you're smiling. Your thoughts on that?
Um, there was an analogy, I don't know if I can remember it now, but it was one of the ideas that was put forth from nations in these negotiations with the WHO. And their initial idea was that they wanted the Director General to go through a mechanism of an allocation mechanism for products for health. And essentially, he would be able to tell Nation A that since they have the manufacturing capacity to make some product, they had to make it and give it to the nation that needed it. Now, in a very wonderful world, people would be giving, and if you went to your neighbor and the classic, you know, uh, uh, middle income suburban legend in the United States is, oh, the housewife is baking a cake and she needs to knock on the neighbor's door to borrow a cup of flour or a cup of sugar. Of course you share with your neighbors if you have the capacity to do so. But the dynamic that they were trying to institute was some neighbor across town has a friend who needs something. So they would come to your door and tell you that you had to give to them what their friend needed. And so, charity begins at home, but it's not to be directed by a third party who takes from someone to give to someone else. The opportunity for corruption is just off the charts ridiculous.
Absolutely. And that's what they've done. Here in Jamaica, our politicians from both sides have tricked us into telling us that they're going to help us. And here's how they've helped us, James and Ms. Walker. They have borrowed over $2 trillion and they put us in debt. And when they're finished with the $2 trillion, we have our education system is a shambles. And just so you know, Mr. Roguski, in our last results from our schools, we do what is called CSEC, where the kids take a school leaving exam. They're now graduating from high school, and they do many subjects, two of which are math and English, and you have physics, chemistry, and so on. 82%, 82% of our students failed to pass 5 subjects, including math and English. 82%. Now, that number is actually fraudulent and false. Now, I've made it a studied purpose in my life to pay attention to statistics carefully, and I always see the lie in them. The number is way higher than 82%. I'll tell you why. Here's how it works. Let's say you have 200 students who should have taken this exam. 200 students. The teachers will decide which of the 200 will be sent to take the exams. So you have to be approved. Now, if they only approve 100 of the students to take the exams and 82% of them failed, then it's 82 plus the 100 they did not approve to take the exam.
Mhm.
Do the math.
Yep.
Wow.
That's 91%. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
no, statistics are continually used, by people.
Absolutely.
To
And
lie.
by the way, I'm glad thank you so much there. I'm glad you mentioned, statistics and what happened, because in my country, unfortunately, most of us are extremely poor at math. Most of us. It's the one subject that almost every student fails and dreads to take. And they have purposefully done that. I mean, I used to be a math teacher, and I found the most effective ways to make children love mathematics, because it's the best. I like math because it's the only subject where you never, and until you get to certain levels, you never have to be doubtful about the answer. It's either right or wrong. It's not somewhere in between, right? While in English language, you can say it this way or you can say it that way, and but in math it's always right or wrong, and until you get to certain levels of mathematics where it's a little bit more tricky.
Until you get into statistics.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so here they had to tell us that 82% failed, but it's worse than 82% who have failed. Now, just imagine, and by the way, it's not just this year. All the previous years, we have had 70% or more failing. Now, look at the impact of this. If every year your high school graduates, this is your nation, this is the people who are going to make up your country, every year, 70% or more fail. So you put out a cohort of 100, 70 or more are substandard. They cannot reason effectively. They cannot communicate effectively. They cannot compute effectively. They cannot analyze effectively. Okay, 70%. Now, those who make up the 30% or less, in this case 18%, within 3 years, half of them would have migrated from the country, half or more, because America and Canada and the UK are always looking for help at whatever level, so they take some of our teachers, they take some of our police officers, they take some of our engineers, and so on. And they normally take the best ones, right? And every morning, if you were to drive by the US Embassy, you'll see a long line of people waiting to get out of this country. Now, this is what is left to vote. So after you get the 70% who are substandard, and you have lost more than half of those who were average or more or better, you've lost half of them, and you're building consistently year after year, you're accumulating the wrong kind of citizens. And I'm not saying the citizens are bad. I'm just saying this is what what has been done to them. The nation has made them who they are. I'll give you one quick example. In 1966, we got 27 times our education budget in a loan. So our annual education budget, we got 27 times that in one loan. 27 times. Okay? That was in 1966. The goal of that loan was to build schools because we had an explosion in our population at the time. That money we spent twice as much money to build half as many schools as what was planned. Half as many schools for twice as much. Now, what did that do to our nation? Very simple. It meant that all the classrooms were overcrowded. It meant we had to put in a shift system. So it means that we could not have full day school for all the students. We had to break them into 2 shifts. So now you have lower tutorial times and you had overcrowded classrooms. And on top of that, our teacher training facilities were not putting out enough and of the right quality. So we had what were called pre-trained teachers, who were people who were not teachers at all, that were placed in classrooms. People like myself, I was a pre-trained teacher, didn't go to teachers college or anything, and I was asked to help out. And I would be teaching. Now, I would love to think I was great, but I must admit I'm certain that I must have told my students some dumb things because I wasn't properly trained to teach. So you had pre-trained teachers in the classroom, teachers who are teaching who are not competent to teach. You had too many students in the classroom. You had shift systems. Some kids were coming to school at 12 or 11 or 12, and some were coming at 7 or 8. And it's a really absurd system. But at the end of the day, you end up with a population that is not at the level to be highly productive to pay back the $2 trillion in debt. So how do you pay back the $2 trillion? You make sure you continue to keep the school system substandard by not investing in it, to keep the healthcare system substandard by not investing in it, keep the road network substandard by not investing in it. So you have bad roads, inefficiencies, incompetent people holding government offices, and so on. And that feeds on itself and creates a generation of poverty and corruption and so on and so on and so forth. So this is how serious all of these things are that we're talking about here today. But I digressed too much and too far. Now, let's get back on track. I know you have to leave soon, James, so please let me know when you have to go. Ms. Walker and I will continue for a little bit, Ms. Walker, if we have to. But now we're going to look at the very first principle after reading all of that. The very first principle, personal liberty. Can you read that one for us, James? Personal liberty.
Individuals are inherently free to make choices for themselves and must accept full responsibility for the consequences of the choices they make. We support an individual's right to make choices in life, but that does not mean that we necessarily approve or disapprove of those choices. No individual, group, or government may rightly initiate force against any other individual, group, or government. As uniters, we reject the notions that groups have inherent rights. Only individuals have rights. We support the rights of the smallest minority, which is the individual. In summary, you should have the right to do whatever you wish with your life, liberty, and property as an adult in his or her right mind, provided you do not initiate force or engage in fraud to infringe upon or take the life, liberty, or property of others. Like I said earlier, you're taking me back to my 10th grade government class. Could not agree more. It's ingrained. It's ingrained deep down inside me. Yeah.
Can you imagine if we were to live that, Ms. Walker? If we were to live, have a nation state where this is the foundation and the basis of our everyday life. Go ahead, your thoughts.
I was just thinking I see a little bit of John F. Kennedy in this as well, because that's probably one of the reasons why they got rid of him to begin with. But yeah, we need to really, as people, as citizens of the world, really start assessing what we consider as governments, because it's not working. As a person myself, my family, my friends, we as young people, we're feeling hopeless. We're feeling left behind. We're feeling that something is really fundamentally wrong with the system of government today. And I don't know what the future holds.
Well, this is what is wrong with it. It has gone off the rails. Here in Jamaica, our government doesn't understand any of this. I mean, this is not even taught in our schools. This is new. This is foreign to everybody here. If you go on the streets in Jamaica and were to interview people right now, none of this would be a part of their radar. This is completely new to it's not new to Americans, because this is the kind of stuff that they talked about in 1776 and 1800s and the early 1900s and so on. But for most of the world, they live in countries where the people are like the wards of the state. The state is God, and they're like something else. They're like a little, thing there. But Juliet here on the live, she says, I'm 54 and I am one of them. I think she's talking about the math situation. She's 54 and she's one of those who, were not really good at math. Now, the concept of self-ownership and the concept of self-ownership comes out of what we just talked about here. Ms. Walker, quickly read that for us. Individuals own their own bodies.
Individuals own their bodies and have full rights over them that other individuals, groups, and governments may not violate. Individuals have the freedom and responsibility to decide what they knowingly and voluntarily consume and what risk they accept in their own health, finances, safety, or life.
Continue.
No one shall be obligated by law to pay for the choices of others, nor should anyone knowingly engage in any action that shall infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of others without their unequivocal and expressed permission in writing that is legally executed and independently veri- um, verifiable. In other words, you own you. You are your property. The government does not own you and has no right to force you, for example, to take any form of medication, such as a vaccine.
If you notice here, the UIC's manifesto is really very, very fixated on making sure you understand your rights and understand how important it is that those rights are protected. So you've spent a lot of time on that to ensure you understand that you own you. Now we're going to go into the issue of communication. Right now in the world, we're having a serious problem with free speech. More and more, you're seeing governments becoming very aggressive at attacking you for free speech. Here in Jamaica, our own fake prime minister, and I have to call him fake because he's not truly elected by the people of Jamaica. His party got 21% of the entire electorate. 21% voted for his party. The other one that is called the opposition, only 16% of the electorate voted for them. And we know that those votes came from buying it. They went into communities where they've kept the people starving, and then they gave them small trinkets and tokens and excited them and got them to vote for them. While the media, which is controlled by those who fund their parties, um, give the people information that misleads them away from alternatives and to focus on this, just like you're seeing in the US right now, where the media tries to control the electorate and points them in a particular direction. They can take a dog and make him popular in the media. So here we are. We're now going to talk about expression and communication because that is so very, very critical. It says here, we support full freedom of expression and oppose government censorship, regulation, or control of communications, media, and technology. We favor the freedom to engage in or abstain from any religious or special interest group. We oppose government actions which either aid or attack any religion or special interest group. However, no group shall be permitted to engage in activities that violate the rights of others. James, your thoughts?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It has become an enormous problem. Uh, the government in the United States very clearly has tried to get around its restrictions by having corporations do their dirty work. And so anytime you see the phrase public-private partnership,
Yes,
you should be worried about a fascist
very
takeover of
worried.
some type of rights or freedom.
James, stick a pin. Can you explain fascism for our audience? I don't think they hear these terms, by the way. They hear communism, socialism, capitalism, fascism, and most people, they might have initial internal reaction to these words, but they really do not always know what they mean. What is fascism?
Any term can be debated, and it's arguable as to whether or not Benito Mussolini actually did say what he's been attributed to have said, which is it's better called corporatism. And
Mhm.
it's government working together with corporations at the expense of the people. And so,
Example, during the recent pandemic, the government of Jamaica, um, they were not able because we were leading the people to rise up against the idea of them mandating the injection. So what they did was to say, "Oh no, we have no intention of mandating any injection," and then they go to the corporations that fund their political parties already, that owns them, and say, "Okay, you are the major employer of most Jamaicans, so you just make it so that anyone who wants to come to work and get a paycheck needs to be injected." And
mhm.
so they started using the corporation to enact their evil policies by forcing employees, if by any company, it doesn't matter if it's a healthcare company or not. Once they own these companies, whether it's, they work for the tourism industry or manufacturing or whatever, force them to do that. They also did the same thing with the national ID card that their colonial masters tell them to implement so that they can better track and control our citizens. They initially passed the law that said, you must get this or else we're going to find you big amounts of money. The fake opposition, because they're playing their political game, took them to court, and the court ruled that it's unconstitutional to do this, and so they had to pull back. Government says, no problem, no problem. We don't really want to force you anyway. It's not a force thing. So no problem. We're not going to force you. And then when they did that, I said, no, you're lying. What you're going to do, you're going to force the people through the back door. And they're doing it exactly that way. Now, what they did after Hurricane Beryl, they said, we're going to give you some money to help fix your roofs and whatever. But to get that money, you have to get the card. And then the banks now are coming on with it. Well, you want to have a bank account. Well, to get the bank account, you have to get the card. And then they said, okay, we have some money we want to give out to the poor and indigent people who are suffering. To get your poor relief, to get the poor relief, you have to get the card. So they're trying to find every which way possible, to work through corporatism or fascism in order to get their objectives met. So it's not just dictatorship that's obvious, it's through the corporate mechanism, and that is fascism, right?
And I would like to add one little thing, and then I do need to go, so maybe I'll wrap it up with this. I've published at least one article about how it's my belief that there's been a 21st century upgrade to that system, and now it's actually a three-legged beast, and very, very stable, because what's been added to that are the many non-government organizations. They call
Yes,
them
yes.
many things: foundations, NGOs, civil
Charities.
society organizations,
Mhm,
charities, so many groups
mhm,
that they are funded in many cases by government,
mhm.
purportedly to do some kind of wonderful humanitarian work, but it's really just glorified money laundering.
Mhm.
And so the corporations that end up with the contracts from the foundations, yes, they don't make a profit, but everybody involved makes a great income.
Mhm.
And so the WHO is not, they're sort of the government organization in that their average salary for their 9,100 or so employees was $131,000 a year. Out of
Average
their
salary.
out of
Average.
out of their $4 billion a year budget,
Mhm.
30% of it goes to salaries.
And
Almost
for what? And what are they doing for us? They're,
bureaucracy. It's
so here
bureaucracy.
we have it, and I'm glad you raised this. So it's my friends who are watching, right? So we're talking about fascism here, and the three-legged stool: government, corporation, and non-government organization, whatever they're called,
Mhm.
foundations or charities or civil society groups. The three of them together. It doesn't mean that every non-government organization is bad, and it doesn't mean that every government is bad, and it doesn't mean that every corporation is bad. But what we're saying here, they those who wish to do evil hide behind these things: public-private partnerships, government using your tax dollars to sponsor NGOs. Who gave them that permission? Did they come to you when they were seeking your votes to say, vote for us so we can give your tax dollars to this NGO or that NGO? No, they didn't. And they should not be allowed to do this. And what your government is being used to do, for example, the Jamaican government is being used by outside forces to say, we need your children to learn about and to accept certain um oh yeah, to accept and learn certain social behaviors. For example, we might want them to question their gender. We might want boys to become uncomfortable with just being boys and to become girls, or we might want people to be confused about sexual orientation, and they can use your government with your government's full consent, not your consent, because you never voted for this. Our existing government did not come to you and say, please vote for us so that we can take money from foreign entities to teach your kids to be confused about their gender or their sexual orientation, or to over sexualize them, or whatever it is. So we have to be careful about what we're allowing. And that is why we need to limit government, pull it back, take back your tax dollars from them, and prevent them also from taking monies from others to pursue special interest objectives. The only interest they should be serving is to protect your sovereignty. That's the only interest your government should be serving. It should not be serving the interest of trying to bring in some other people's agenda and force that on your people. Am I right, Ms. Walker?
Yeah,
James?
I just want to say again, we have examples in the past. Then Germany with the Nazi situation, we have the Soviet Union. Those are clear examples of such violations, and we should take a lesson from history because we know where those situations ended. And today it seems that we're no different. We're moving in the same direction as we haven't learned very well from the history of mankind and the faults that were made by their government. They're
Mhm.
making the same decision, the same consequences are yet to be told.
Okay. And James, your final thoughts before you go on anything. You get to, if you're leaving now, so you can comment on anything before you head off for the
Well,
night.
the other term that they use for these groups, they refer to them as relevant stakeholders. And
Mm.
a stakeholder is someone who holds a stake. There's money involved. They have a reason for being there. And as all of these meetings and everything happens, they make space for organizations to have a say. They are relevant to the discussion, which implies that we, the people, are not.
We're not
And
relevant.
and so what has happened is they become an organization of organizations,
Mhm.
and the people's vote and the government's place in that spot get wiped out essentially by money.
Mhm.
And so the last word I will say is the way they generally operate is they tell you what they're doing. They put it out there. They have papers, they have reports, they have documents, they have declarations, all these many things. Um, and if you are too busy trying to live your life and pay your bills and care for your family and get an education or do whatever it is you do in your life, you don't have time to keep up with the fact that they're telling you how they're going to abuse you. And then they say, well, you can object to it, but if you're silent, they'll take that as your acquiescence or your acceptance
Mhm.
of whatever it is they say they're going to do. So,
And most people are silent. Most, like
most people are silent and they're misinformed by the media. So, even if they
and in my case, in our case here in Jamaica, not only are they misinformed by the media, but remember, the majority of us are undereducated already. So we're starting from behind. So the typical boy or girl, the young man or woman here in Jamaica, already did not have a good foundational education. Our basic school teachers, I don't know what you call it in the US, but I think you call it probably pre-K or something. Our young babies that goes to school at age 3 to 6 years old, they go to what is called a basic school. The teachers who are teaching in the basic school are not trained teachers. They're not necessarily they might mean well, they might be lovely. I had a lovely basic school teacher, Miss Dorothy, a lovely principal, Miss Johnson, lovely ladies. But the truth is, many of these teachers in these basic school are not equipped to develop young minds and prepare them for a brilliant future. And then they go on to primary school from age 6, 7, all the way to 12, 13. And again, poor quality, poor standard. Then they go to secondary school. And as you know, 82% of them fail or 70% of them fail. At the end of the day, what do we end up with? The government is acting on their behalf. They have MPs, members of parliament, who represents them, but don't represent them. They represent the party. They represent those who fund and own the party. And so the real laws and regulations which are passed are not passed to protect their rights or to make their lives better. The laws and regulations are passed to give more power and more financial resources to a subset of our society. Worse, as Jamaica fails, more and more of those subsets are foreigners who own our assets. They own our bauxite, they own our sugar mills, they own our factories, they own our service sectors, they own our tourism product. So the people are becoming less and less represented in this stakeholder arrangement. Mm-hmm. And the public-private partnerships are not public-private partnerships with the government of Jamaica, with the people of Jamaica, but with the government of Jamaica and foreign interests here as NGOs and foreign interests here as corporate entities. And so little by little, the people of Jamaica are merely becoming rubber stamp of a government that doesn't represent or work for them. They authenticate them through a fake democratic process where we vote every 4 to 5 years, but we're voting mechanically. We're not voting intelligently. We're not voting with any real expectations of development. We're voting, those who do vote, for basic handouts, for a little drop of flour or sugar, a little goat or chicken, a little block or cement, for basic needs which are not met by these tokens, but are satisfying the simplistic mindset of our people because of how they've been kept academically under educated. And the end result of that is a Jamaica that is more and more becoming a place where we, the people, are tenants in our own country. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Please do send me the additional documents that we've been talking about. I look forward to looking through that. And thank you, Carrie. Appreciate your invite this evening.
My pleasure,
and,
Mr. James.
Look forward to talking
to you in the
future.
We'll be back for part 2. This is part 1. We only got to 1.2 in our document. We have a lot more to discuss, but thank you so much, James, for your time. Really appreciate your perspective. Have a good night. Just walk us, stay on for a bit so we can close this out. But thanks again, James. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Ms. Walker, for sitting this out with us tonight. In the comment section, we have Kirk Clark, who is saying, I hate to say it, but until the people want better and not free goods, they will stay in a downward spiral. Here's the problem, Chris Clark. The people will not be able to want better. The people are where the people are. It will take some of us, a subset of us, to lead the rest of us. So we need more Kerry Walkers. We need more Chris Clarks. We need more Juliet. We need more the Easy Jerk World. We need more August. We need more, who else? Patricia Borges. We need more Sulfa. We need more Carol Spence. We need more Rumination with Andrew. All of you guys who are on here watching tonight, Nathaniel Emmings, we need us to become the 500,000 Jamaicans who are making this thing work. Miss Carrie Walker will tell you about our mission to reach 500,000 Jamaicans. We need to have 500,000 Jamaicans who are going to get involved in helping us to build a coalition of Jamaicans. And the two current parties, right, they're subsisting on only about 30% of the electorate. So they're being elected by about 30% of the electorate. There's 70% or sometimes 60%, whatever the number is, who are not fully, if engaged at all, with them, right? So we, the people, can take back the narrative. We can actually, in a group like ourselves, the UIC, become dominant enough to lead the people out of Egypt and into the promised land. Your thoughts, Ms. Walker. Can you tell us about our goal to reach 500,000 paying
Well,
members and how people can do that?
we're asking citizens at home and abroad. We're looking to you, the diasporans, to help us out. We need your involvement on every level. We need your skill sets. We need your donations. We need to have the organization run efficiently. And to do that, we need you to contribute. We're asking members to contribute just 10 US dollars per month. We have staffing, we have commitments, bills, etc. And we need all your involvement. Please join us and contact us in the description below.
Thank you. So basically, freedom is not free. We have to pay for it. And if we don't pay for freedom, we'll pay for slavery. Yeah.
Absolutely,
It's very
absolutely.
simple. So, what the UIC is trying to do, we're not playing politics as usual, the games and gimmicks and all the stuff that they do. We're putting together, and we have put together a solid solution for Jamaica, a manifesto that will work, a new constitution that will make Jamaica a true republic, um, uh, a system that will help our young people become productive and efficient, a system that will help adults who are left behind to be brought up to speed to the level that they can and to become productive. But we cannot do this without your support. The two main political parties, the two traditional parties, what I call the colonial parties, they're funded by the PSOJ oligarchs. They're funded by those who want to maintain the system that we just talked about a while ago, that we're trying to break away from. They are being heavily funded to continue and maintain that system. Now, any alternative to them, there's no alternative that can compete with them unless you fund it. If you do not fund it, what will happen is the oligarchs will continue to fund the other two, and you and I will never be able to realize what we want to achieve because nobody's funding us. We, the people, have to fund our own political movement to achieve our own objective. When you fund the UIC, you're funding your own political party and your own political movement to achieve the objectives that you and I know we ought to achieve. And so we're depending on you to make that difference. We've made it as simple as possible. You go to our website at uicjamaica.com and you click on the donate button and you can donate immediately there. Ms. Walker is our treasurer, and the rest of our National Executive Committee members will ensure that your funds are spent properly and fully accounted for.
And I
Every
just,
year, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
sorry, sir, I just want to also thank those who have been contributing on a monthly basis and has been very committed. The UIC really appreciate your commitment, your consistency, and thank you again.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm really very impressed with the work that you have been doing, Madam Treasurer. We're seeing the impact of your connecting with the members. I'm sure they're happy to get your call. You've been talking to a lot of people. How has that been going? Just chatting with people from all walks of life about the
I,
movement.
yeah, I think our members, they're excited to hear from us and they look forward to those conversations. And I think it's incumbent that we make it a habit to touch base with our members because oftentimes when the conversation is not there, we lose patients and we lose memberships. So we want to get in the habit of touching base and we want to welcome any inputs whatsoever. We are a family. We're all in this together. We're not just a group of us, but we all want the best for Jamaica. We want to return to a safe Jamaica, most of us, and we want Jamaica to be prosperous for all. So let's work together and make it happen.
Thank you. I see Juliet is asking. She wants to know, where is the UIC in Toronto? Please, Juliet, the UIC is everywhere because we operate remotely, right? So Miss Walker can always talk to you wherever you are in the world. Just to give you an idea of how the UIC is structured, our treasurer here resides in Canada, so she's in I think
Toronto.
Mississauga. Mississauga area?
Brampton, Brampton,
Brampton, right?
Brampton.
Brampton, Toronto. Our one of our director, the director that's our recording secretary, she's in, I think, Atlanta. Then you have our general secretary, Mrs. Hogarth. She's in St. Catherine. You have VP Chase Neal. He's in St. Mary. And that's the VP for Middlesex. The VP for Surrey is Miss Jasmine Powell, and she's in Kingston and St. Andrew. And then you have VP Karen Francis. She is in Montego Bay. So our deputy treasurer, our outgoing deputy treasurer, she's in Manchester. So we're all over the place, and so we like to operate remotely, because then you can always reach us, right? You can always get in touch with us. So we don't have an office in Toronto that you can go to. We have people in Toronto that you can speak with, and here in Jamaica, I'm in St. Elizabeth, and we have people in we have Miss Ennis in the UK, for example, Miss King in the UK, our chairman, Miss Elliott, Patrice Elliott, she's in Clarendon. So we're all over the place here in Jamaica and around the world, and we're one big happy family. DUIC is for all Jamaicans, no matter where you are. I think we're the only political movement in Jamaica that is advocating to creating one Jamaica, not just Jamaicans who live at home, but one family of Jamaica. So wherever you are in the world, once you are a Jamaican, you're a part of the Jamaican family, with the same rights and responsibilities to help to protect the interest of your country, as well as your personal interest as an individual. So thanks again for joining us tonight. And remember, one Jamaica, because we're stronger together. Have a good night until next time.
Absolutely. Good night.
Take care.
Good night, everyone. Good
Good
night.
night. Thanks again, Miss Walker, for
Thank
joining
you.
me.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.